at all, and he's actually Bob. But certainly, in my opinion, with the analysis that we're going to be doing, I mean, Bob has said himself that he's not Elvis Presley.
Something unusual has been happening inside a small church in Benton, Arkansas, and millions online cannot stop talking about it. For years, whispers followed Pastor Bob Joyce wherever he preached. Whispers about his voice, his face, his movements, and a connection to the greatest rock and roll legend who ever lived. Now, nearly 5 decades after Elvis Presley's reported passing in 1977, the world wants answers. Is Pastor Bob Joyce really who he says he is? And why does an entire generation refuse to let go? The king who captured the world. The story of Elvis Aaron Presley is one that begins in poverty and ends in legend. Born on January 8, 1935, in a 2-room shotgun house in Tupelo, Mississippi, Elvis came into the world as one of twin brothers, though his identical twin, Jesse Garon Presley, was delivered stillborn. That early shadow of loss would follow the family throughout their years of struggle. Vernon Presley and Gladys Presley raised their son under poverty so real it shaped everything about how Elvis moved through life, how he clung to family, and how desperately he wanted to give those around him something better. The family relocated to Memphis, Tennessee in 1948 when Elvis was 13 years old. That city would become the crucible where a cultural revolution was quietly being forged. By the time Elvis graduated from Humes High School in 1953, he was already drawn to the sounds flowing through the streets and churches of Memphis. Gospel music filled Sunday mornings. Rhythm and blues drifted up from Beale Street at night. Country radio played in kitchens across the South. Elvis absorbed all of it and somehow turned every influence into something that had never existed before. In 1954, he walked into Sun Records and began recording with producer Sam Phillips, who had long believed there was a performer capable of carrying the emotional weight of Black American music to a wider audience. What happened inside that small studio would change popular music permanently. When Elvis recorded That's All Right with guitarist Scotty Moore and bassist Bill Black, the sound that emerged was not quite country, not quite blues, not quite gospel. It was something alive and untamed, and it did not take long for the world to notice. By 1956, after Colonel Tom Parker arranged a deal with R.C. Victor, Elvis became a national sensation almost overnight. Heartbreak Hotel climbed to #1 on the charts. Television appearances on programs like The Ed Sullivan Show brought his swiveling hips and electric energy into millions of American living rooms, simultaneously thrilling young audiences and scandalizing their parents. The controversy only multiplied the fame. Within 2 years, Elvis Presley had become the defining symbol of a generational shift in American culture, breaking racial and cultural lines that rarely bent during that era. Military service interrupted his peak years when Elvis was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1958. He served in West Germany, where his mother Gladys died of a heart attack at 46 while he was stationed abroad. He later married Priscilla Beaulieu, whom he had met during his time in Germany. The two went on to have a daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, born in 1968, before divorcing in 1973. His 1968 comeback special revived public excitement and led Elvis into his Las Vegas performing era. But his health quietly declined as prescription substance dependency and weight gain took hold. By 1977, the 42-year-old was preparing for another tour. On August 16th, girlfriend Ginger Alden found him unresponsive in his Graceland bathroom. Paramedics arrived, but every effort to revive him failed. Elvis Presley was pronounced dead at Baptist Memorial Hospital at 3:30 p.m. on August 16, 1977, with the official cause of death listed as cardiac arrhythmia. He was 42 years old. The world reacted with disbelief. Fans gathered outside Graceland in the tens of thousands. A cultural figure of that magnitude passing so young, so suddenly, felt impossible to process. Grief swept across every corner of the globe. And yet, almost immediately, a quieter question began forming in the minds of some who simply could not accept what had happened. What if Elvis had not really died? That question, small and stubborn at first, would grow into one of the most enduring mysteries in American popular culture. But before following it where it leads today, the full story of what happened in the years after that August afternoon must be explored, because the foundation matters enormously to everything that came next. The mystery that would not die. No celebrity death in modern history has produced the volume of sustained conspiracy theory surrounding it that Elvis Presley's has. The earliest seeds of doubt were planted almost immediately. Within 24 hours of his death, the first alleged Elvis sighting had already been reported at Memphis International Airport, according to documented records of the era. What began as a niche topic discussed among fringe fans in underground publications during the early 1980s crossed into widespread media coverage in 1987, when a woman named Louise Welling falsely claimed to have spotted Elvis alive at a Burger King in Kalamazoo, Michigan. That story spread rapidly, and suddenly what had been whispered became shouted. The theories that circulated varied in their specifics, but shared a common framework. Elvis, they suggested, had felt trapped by fame, threatened by dangerous forces, and desperate enough to stage his own disappearance. Some theorists pointed to alleged inconsistencies in the weight of his casket, which eyewitnesses claimed felt unusually heavy, suggesting a substitute had been placed inside. Others referenced what they described as a misspelling on his grave marker. Conspiracy theorists treated each of these details as proof of an elaborate scheme. One of the most widely circulated theories tied Elvis to a federal witness protection program. Author Gail Brewer Giorgio, who died in January 2025 at the age of 85, spent decades promoting the idea that Elvis had faked his death to escape threats linked to his role as an undercover government agent. Her 1988 best-selling book, Is Elvis Alive?, argued that Elvis had worked with the FBI and been placed into a protected identity after his staged death. The FBI never confirmed those claims, and credible evidence supporting the theory has never emerged. The autopsy itself became a focal point for suspicion. The Presley family made the decision to keep portions of Elvis's autopsy report sealed from public view for 50 years, meaning those documents were not expected to be fully accessible until 2027. That decision, however understandable from a family privacy standpoint, provided conspiracy theorists with exactly the kind of institutional withholding they needed to sustain their arguments. Medical examiner Dr. Jerry Francisco announced at the time that preliminary findings pointed to cardiac arrhythmia, further specifying that coronary artery disease appeared to be a contributing factor. He stated publicly that prescription substances were not a factor in the death, a conclusion that other members of the autopsy team contested privately, believing substance toxicity was a probable contributing cause. That internal disagreement became another crack through which a doubt flowed freely. Sightings of Elvis multiplied over the following decades. An organized group called the Elvis Sightings Society was formally established in 1989 to catalog reported encounters. Some fans claimed to have seen him in grocery stores, at gas stations, and at mundane locations far removed from any celebrity spotlight. A widely circulated claim even emerged that Elvis had appeared as a background extra in the 1990 comedy film Home Alone, a story that spread far and wide before being debunked. Then came the internet age. Social media and video platforms gave the conversation about Elvis's possible survival an enormous new stage. Fans who had spent years exchanging theories in letters and at conventions now had global audiences at their fingertips. Researchers uploaded comparisons, analysis videos, and documentary-style content that reached millions. And somewhere in that expanding digital landscape, a small congregation in Benton, Arkansas, began receiving a kind of attention its pastor had never sought and never expected. Before exploring the man at the center of this modern chapter of the story, it is worth pausing to understand what exactly draws people so powerfully to the idea that a beloved figure might have survived. That pull reveals something important about how the world processes loss, and why some legends are simply too large for ordinary endings. The Arkansas pastor and the viral storm. Bob Joyce leads the Household of Faith Church in Benton, Arkansas, a congregation that grew from humble meetings of 7 or 8 people into a modest but devoted community. Before the church rented its first formal space on Salem Road in 2014, Joyce and his wife, Wilena, had met weekly with a small group in informal settings. By 2019, the church had relocated to its current address at 5601 Salt Creek Road, which includes classrooms and a fellowship hall, with seating for approximately 100 people. By any measure, this is not the kind of place that attracts international media attention. Yet, that is precisely what happened. Videos of Bob Joyce preaching and singing gospel music began circulating online and gaining traction among Elvis fans who found themselves stopping mid-scroll to rewatch certain clips. The similarities were undeniable to anyone who had spent time watching Elvis Presley perform. The deep baritone voice, the way certain vowels curved and rolled through a phrase, the physical build, the silver hair, the manner of carrying himself behind a microphone. Bob Joyce looks, to many observers, like an older silver-haired version of Elvis. And when a YouTube video of him singing "How Great Thou Art" circulated widely, the same hymn Elvis had recorded memorably in 1967, the speculation reached a new level of intensity.
Before checking out these videos, and a lot of people are saying how similar his voice is to that of Elvis Presley's, and some people have even said that it's actually Elvis.
Comment sections filled with declarations from fans who said they had no doubt. Some wrote messages addressed directly to Joyce as though he were Elvis, thanking him for still being alive and expressing love and relief. Longtime Elvis fan Tom Mennel, who had been following Presley's music since childhood, described watching a video of Joyce preach and becoming convinced he was looking at the king himself. His comments represented thousands of similar reactions, flooding in from viewers across the United States, Europe, and beyond. Visitors traveled from London and France specifically to attend services at Household of Faith, sitting in the pews and listening to Joyce preach, trying to determine for themselves whether they were looking at a legendary musician living quietly under a new identity. Bob Joyce has addressed these rumors directly from the pulpit, consistently and clearly stating that he is not Elvis Presley. His response to the speculation has been gracious rather than agitated. He has acknowledged that he understands why people notice the resemblance, and he has pointed out, practically, that Elvis Presley would have been born in 1935, making him nearly 20 years older than Joyce himself, who was born in 1952. That age gap alone, Joyce has noted, makes the identification difficult to sustain under basic scrutiny. Joyce has also remarked that even if the resemblance brings broken-hearted people through his church doors, he welcomes the opportunity to minister to them. Careful physical comparison has provided additional reasons for skepticism. Analysts who examined photographs and video footage side by side pointed out specific differences. Joyce's eye color differs from Elvis's documented eye color. A visible gap between his front teeth is a feature Elvis did not have. These are fixed characteristics, and they do not match. The title and premise of the viral video format, suggesting Bob Joyce has confirmed the truth about Elvis at the age of 89, plays on a very specific emotional trigger. If Elvis had been born in 1935 and had survived to 2024 or 2025, he would indeed be approaching 90. The number carries weight because it feels plausible enough to resonate. The content attached to those titles, however, has consistently found no credible confirmation of any kind. The confirmation in such framing typically refers either to Joyce's repeated denials, which are themselves presented as suspicious, or to ambiguous moments in sermons that fans interpret as accidental self-revelation. One particular incident circulated widely across TikTok and YouTube, in which Joyce appeared to briefly refer to himself in a way that fans interpreted as an admission. Context and full transcripts of those moments have consistently revealed misinterpretation rather than confession. Joyce has addressed those viral moments with the same calm consistency he brings to the broader question. He is not Elvis Presley, he never was. And the resemblance, while he understands it, does not change that fact. What this phenomenon reveals, when examined honestly, is something genuinely compelling about human psychology and the nature of grief after enormous loss. Understanding why this particular story refuses to rest requires looking at something deeper than any single video or any one pastor's denials. What the mystery really tells us. The Bob Joyce story, stripped of its sensational framing, is ultimately a window into how human beings process the loss of cultural figures who feel irreplaceable. Elvis Presley was not simply a musician. He was a presence that millions of people organized meaningful portions of their emotional lives around. His voice carried a quality that fans described in deeply personal terms, something that felt like it understood loneliness, longing, and joy simultaneously. When that voice went silent in August 1977, the absence left a space that nothing else has ever fully filled. Priscilla Presley, who married Elvis in 1967 and remained close to his legacy for decades after their divorce, has spoken candidly in recent years about the theories that refuse to disappear. In a September 2025 interview with People, Priscilla stated clearly that there has been so much that is untruthful circulating about Elvis, including persistent claims that he is still alive and hiding somewhere, and she emphasized wanting people to honor who Elvis actually was. Her statements represent a direct appeal to ground the conversation in reality without dismissing the love behind the myth. Baz Luhrmann's 2025 documentary, Epic Elvis Presley in Concert, which premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2025 and received its first advance American screenings at Graceland on January 8, 2026, what would have been Presley's 91st birthday, demonstrated that new generations are still discovering Elvis on their own terms. The documentary earned critical acclaim and brought in over $23 million at the box office. That a documentary built on archival concert footage could generate that level of response in 2026 confirms what the Bob Joyce phenomenon already suggested. Elvis Presley's hold on the cultural imagination has not weakened by a single degree. The specific mechanics of why conspiracy theories about celebrity deaths take hold have been studied extensively. Public figures who die young, who leave behind unresolved questions about their circumstances, and who represented something larger than individual fame create the exact conditions where denial becomes attractive. Elvis checked every one of those boxes. He died at 42. Questions about the precise role of prescription medication in his death were never fully resolved to public satisfaction, and the sheer scale of what he represented in American life made accepting his absence feel like accepting something too large and too final. The phenomenon is not unique to Elvis. Similar theories have followed Michael Jackson, who died in 2009, and circulated after the deaths of Jim Morrison and James Dean in earlier decades. What makes the Elvis version distinctive is its longevity and specificity. The Bob Joyce theory gave the abstraction a face, a voice, a physical address, and a weekly sermon schedule. It transformed the wish into something that could be visited, heard, and argued about with reference to concrete details. That is why it has sustained itself for years in a media landscape that usually moves on within days. The reality Bob Joyce has provided consistently throughout this entire experience is a helpful corrective to the mythology. He is a man dedicated to his faith and his congregation. The church he built from a handful of people meeting informally into a functioning community represents genuine pastoral labor that has nothing to do with rock and roll mythology. His musical gifts are real and evident, and he has handled the unwanted fame with a generosity of spirit that says something authentic about his character. The truth about Elvis Presley, established by witnesses, medical personnel, death certificates, autopsy reports, and decades of verified historical record, is that he died on August 16, 1977, at the age of 42, inside the mansion where he had built his American dream. The truth about Pastor Bob Joyce, established by the man himself through years of consistent, calm, public statement, is that he is an Arkansas pastor and gospel singer who happens to carry a voice and a face that remind an aching world of someone it has never fully stopped mourning. Those two truths can coexist without contradiction. The viral framing that insists one of them is false has never produced evidence capable of changing either. What it has produced, in abundance, is a reminder of how powerful the need for continuation can be when the love for someone has been real enough and deep enough. Elvis Presley's music continues to be discovered by new listeners every year. His catalog remains among the most streamed of any artist from his era. His influence lives inside the DNA of virtually every genre of popular music that came after him. In that sense, the question of whether he is alive is almost beside the point. Something of his survives in every chord that carries the same spirit he brought to that small studio in Memphis in 1954. That survival does not require a conspiracy. It does not require a church in Arkansas. It simply requires ears willing to listen, and there has never been a shortage of those. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.